There is audio up right now of Donald Trump on the phone with Tim Walz praising him.
Liberal Fox News commentator Jessica Tarlov yet again flattened a panel of her MAGA co-hosts as they became increasingly deranged on the topic of Democratic Governor Tim Walz, the vice president's new running mate, and she even brilliantly used recently released leaked audio of Donald Trump to do it. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips, many clips to talk about in this video, so let's dive right in. One of the talking points that Republicans are scrambling to use against Governor Tim Walz is that as governor of Minnesota, he failed to deploy the National Guard in a time that they felt was appropriate to quell high-profile riots going on in Minneapolis. Maybe it'll land, maybe it won't. It's important to remember that when Donald Trump was president of the United States, he watched his own supporters attack the United States Capitol in an insurrection to try to kill Vice President Pence, kill high-profile congresspeople, and install Trump as an unelected dictator. They don't care about that, but they think that Tim Walz, as a Democratic governor, did not act quickly enough to quell some of the George Floyd riots. Jessica Tarlov addresses this, and she has an ace up her sleeve thanks to recently released leaked audio of Trump.
Not blaming. I mean, I'm just saying.
Tim Walz called in the National Guard before
over tampons.
May 30th.
No,
May
on
30th.
May 28th, more than
May
7 hours
30th.
before Trump asked to do. There is audio up right now of Donald Trump on the phone with Tim Walz praising him, as well as Secretary of Defense, I should say, Mark Esper, who wrote in his book about what a good job Tim Walz did with that.
Then why is the city a crisp? Why is the city burned down?
It's still
if we did such a great job.
I love that you
most dangerous city in the country.
We didn't even get to.
Minneapolis, I can confirm, is not burned to a crisp. Republicans and Jesse Waters and Fox propagandists, of course, are lying about it. But Jessica Tarlov is right. So shortly before the 5 went on air, we found leaked audio. There's leaked audio circulating throughout the internet of a phone call between then President Trump and multiple governors. And Tim Walz is on the line. And Donald Trump actually does single out Tim Walz and praise him for his response in terms of deploying the National Guard to quell the riots.
I know Governor Walz is on the phone, and we spoke, and I fully agree with the way he handled it the last couple of days. I asked him to do that, and the whole world was laughing. 2 days, 3 days later, I spoke to the governor. The governor's, I think, on the call, and he's an excellent guy. You've got a big National Guard out there that's ready to come in and fight like hell. I tell you, the best, what they did in Minneapolis was incredible. They went in and dominated, and it happened immediately. Tim is on the phone now, Tim Walz. Again, I was very happy with the last couple of days, Tim. You called up big numbers, and the big numbers knocked them out so fast, it was like bowling pins.
So there you go. This is going to be incredibly handy in terms of disarming the bad faith MAGA talking points regarding Walz's handling of the George Floyd protests, because we now have audio of their own cult leader praising Tim Walz for doing the thing that they're now criticizing Tim Walz for doing. Great stuff, and it's good that Jessica Tarlov deployed it. But during that panel, there were other unhinged attacks on Tim Walz, including the fact that I think it was about 30 years ago, between 20 and 30 years ago, Governor Walz was arrested for driving under the influence.
Finally, this is what I love about this guy. This guy is a great drunk driver, and I'll tell you why. As a drunk driver, he thought the police that were trying to pull him over, he says he thought, according to his lawyer when he was pleading guilty, that it was some guy chasing him. Okay, the guy chasing him was the cops. So what's your excuse for speeding at 96 miles an hour, although I shouldn't talk, 96 miles an hour, before the troopers started chasing?
So again, they're hitting Walz on a DUI, which he suffered, or which he, committed decades ago. Travis Ackers pointed this out on Twitter. He says, yes, it's true. Tim Walz was arrested for DUI 30 years ago. Here's the part I love. He took complete responsibility and didn't just stop there. He stopped drinking and became sober. What a great example of responsibility and leadership. MAGA, you won't win on that attack. Listen, driving under the influence or driving while intoxicated, it's called the DWI now. It is wildly irresponsible. It's incredibly dangerous. And he was right to be punished for it. And he should have felt shame at the time. But it was 30 years ago. He changed his life. He turned his life around. This is an example of an American redemption story. Imagine if the shoe was on the other foot and there were Republican politicians who, used drugs or were convicted of doing things while under the influence. Would these MAGA co-hosts accept that as a line of attack? No, they would say the same thing I'm saying now, which is that happened 30 years ago. That's not disqualifying this person has changed. But because it's a Democrat, they refuse to countenance such a redemption. They are desperate to hit him with anything. And so they're going back 30 years ago. Another clip of Jessica Tarlov laying out the facts.
So I'm going to go stolen valor first.
Yes.
So obviously this was going to come up because the Trump campaign manager was the one behind the John Kerry Swift boat attack, which was obviously very persuasive to people. He served for 24 years honorably. Then he stopped to run for Congress on a platform of ending the war. And I don't think that anyone, especially with Donald Trump at the top of the ticket, did he dodge the draft 4 or 5 times? Bone spurs, Captain Bone Spurs? What say you, Judge?
Bone spurs are a very serious issue, Jessica.
I can tell by the way you said that you know that it is not serious.
Yeah, but you know what?
So again, they don't like that. What they're referring to is they're attacking Governor Walz's military record. I mentioned this in a previous video. So he served in the Army National Guard, Vote Vets, which is a Democratic coalition of veterans. So these are people who served their country in the military in uniform. They released a fact sheet about this. Fiction versus facts. Fiction. Tim Walz retired because he knew he was going to deploy to Iraq. The facts are bullshit. Tim submitted his retirement request to the U.S. Army National Guard months prior to notification of his unit's deployment. His unit was fully sourced, staffed, and his request was approved. He retired in May 2005. So they're lying. Another lie, another fiction, is that Tim Walz is using a rank he didn't attain, and that's stolen valor. Bullshit is the fact. Fact is bullshit, and the Minnesota National Guard says it's bullshit. It's entirely accurate to describe Tim Walz as having been a command sergeant major, the rank under which he served, and the Minnesota National Guard has emphasized in public statements that he can be referred to as such. Other people have fact-checked this as well. Alexander Vindman, who served in the Trump administration and is himself a veteran, he's talking to J.D. Vance. He says, "You're a damn liar. May 2005, Tim Walz retires from the National Guard. July 2005, his unit receives alert orders for deployment." Okay? The timeline doesn't add up to align with their claims. September 2005, unit prepares for deployment. March 2006, unit deploys. Nearly a year later, they actually deployed, and it was months after he retired that his unit received the alert. Vindman went on to fact-check Vance in a different area. He says, Vance enlisted and served, because J.D. Vance himself is a veteran. He's a veteran of the Marine Corps. Vance enlisted and served 4 years, including 6 months in Iraq in 2005 as a reporter with the public affairs section of a Marine Aircraft Wing. Walz served 24 years, earning 8 promotions and ending as a command sergeant major, the highest NCO position. I don't think JD wants to compare records, but if he insists, and so this is something that Jessica Tarlov brings up here as well.
I don't think that you should ever say that anyone who served didn't do a good job in this. If J.D. Vance wants to get into that tit for tat, he was in the public affairs department. It's just a fact of all of this. I don't think he should be going there with Tim Walz. I think that everyone who has served...
He was in a war zone. He was in Iraq.
Walking around with a...
He was in Iraq.
Oh, he was a reporter.
He was in Iraq, okay?
Okay.
He was in the Marines.
Okay.
And this guy
I get it. He's
left
a big man.
his
J.D.
unit.
Vance.
His units... Listen, it doesn't matter what I think. His unit thinks he's a coward.
His unit not true.
Thinks he's
and this
a coward.
has come up before in past elections. Okay.
He's offered no source, by the way, for the claim that Governor Walz as a unit thinks that Walz is a coward. On the subject, though, of this sort of thing, the Harris-Walz campaign released a statement. After 24 years of military service, Governor Walz retired in 2005 and ran for Congress, where he chaired Veterans Affairs and was a tireless advocate for our men and women in uniform. And as Vice President of the United States, he will continue to be a relentless champion for our veterans and military families. Governor Walz would never insult or undermine any of American service to this country. In fact, he thanks Senator Vance for putting his life on the line for our country. It's the American way. So very magnanimous and gracious of Governor Walz taking the high road in this case, something that MAGA Republicans would never do. Again, they're behind a cult leader who did everything in his power to dodge the draft and has denigrated the military repeatedly, which is something that Jessica Tarlov brings up here.
You asked me, I'm telling you.
Said that people who had gotten captured, the suckers and losers, doesn't want to go and be seen next to people.
That.
Oh, he's denied everything. He denied he slept with Stormy Daniels,
people.
but that obviously hasn't worked out for him.
Brutal. Absolutely brutal stuff from Jessica Tarlov, who, again, I mean, these people are no match for her. They outnumber her 4-1. They have a home turf advantage with the networks. Every freaking story they cover is relentlessly negative. I think, my God, that typically what happens is each of the five present a story that the other four react to. And even the ones that Jessica Tarlov is forced to present is neutral at best for Democrats, right? So she's outnumbered. She's in enemy terrain in terms of the fact that the Fox Propaganda Network is overwhelmingly ideologically right-wing, and Fox viewers despise her. And yet, despite the heckling, despite the being outnumbered, she constantly outperforms these people because the facts are infinitely more likely to be on her side than not. They don't cite their sources. They constantly make wild claims. They heckle when the shoe is on the other foot. When they're playing defensive, they cut and make it a joke. They won't provide proof for their claims. Absolutely ridiculous stuff. But this goes to show how desperate the Republican campaign against Governor Walz is. And maybe something will change between now and then, but I don't expect that he's going to give them actual material that will land in the realm of public opinion. But it's too soon to tell. In terms of the facts, though, they sit squarely on Governor Walz's side, and Jessica Tarlov made that very clear. Let me know what you think in the comments.